that has fellow Republicans so up in arms. How up in arms? How about ready to stage a little coup of their own? I've got the details coming up.
Reporters are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Know Where to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. Twice a week, I get together with you to talk about some of the more egregious examples of media bias here in Idaho. And of course, where politics is concerned, well, let's just say there's plenty of media bias to go around. Dorothy Moon has been controversial to some people, particularly those who once were in power, but then the voters got wise to them, voted them out, and decided they wanted conservatives who actually voted and governed like conservatives rather than people who simply talked like conservatives as they ran for office and then kind of threw that out the window once they were in power. Once upon a time, the establishment wing of the Republican Party in Idaho was free to do what it wanted to. And then along came some principled conservatives, Dorothy being one of them. And since she has assumed the leadership of the Idaho GOP, well, there's a lot of people who are very upset that they don't have the opportunity to keep their hands on those levers of power. I want to show you a tweet that went up last night. This is from Stop Idaho Rhinos. Tonight, Trent, Luna, and company, that would be Trent Clark, Tom Luna, and a host of other people, had a Rhino Zoom meeting for those they're grooming to take back the party by running as precinct committeemen and then using their wins to vote in a new Idaho GOP executive board at the summer meeting. Now, they were very open about this, and they talked about, we've been working on this for months and months. So Stop Idaho Rhinos was sent this video by someone who was able to log into the meeting for a bit till they got removed for not turning on their camera to be vetted by the group hosts. Now, first question is, why are they working in secrecy? But the tweet says, pay attention to the participants at the top of the screen. And if you go to Stop Idaho Rhinos on X, you can watch this video. It's about 13 minutes long. And there's nothing terribly controversial other than this is how we're going to wrest control of the Republican Party away from the extremists. By the way, if you are a conservative, you're an extremist. So anyway, pay attention to who's at the top of the screen. You got National Committee woman Cindy Sidaway, mostly chairman of Idaho Young Republicans Jacob Clough, who apparently was removed for not living in Idaho, ex-National Committeeman Damon Watkins, Representative Kenny Roten, Caldwell's failed Senator Greg Cheney and his candidate wife, Nampa's ousted Senator Jeff Agenbrod, North Idaho fake Republicans Sandy Patano and Jack Riggs. Okay, there's a little editorializing there in the tweet, but multiple 2024, this part's accurate. Republican, see that in the quotes, candidates. Oh boy, and who was behind it? Well, it was a wonderful little group called Gem State Conservatives. Why? If they're Gem State and conservatives, they've got to be good people, conserving Idaho's values, empowering our future. Now, what you don't realize is the future they're talking about empowering is actually the future of, well, them and their cronies. So let's take a look at what's at stake here. Here's what Maria Olson Nate posted. She says, I remember when Tom Luna was a conservative. In fact, she says, I helped raise $10,000 for him when he ran for state superintendent of public instruction. Then he brought us Common Core. Then he sold his soul to the establishment hacks. Then he became an establishment hack. Now he's gaslighting all of you. She says, don't believe him or any of the rhinos on that call. They don't care about the people. They want their power back. Now, her advice, I think, is very sound. Fight back. Get involved. You must, or we will lose this state forever. Okay, she's being very direct here, but the bottom line is, look, this isn't something you're going to outsource and expect any kind of success. So don't push that heavy lifting off to other people. This is something every one of us has a stake in if we, uphold the principles of limited government, personal liberty, et cetera, et cetera. At any rate, I want you to take a look at what is some of this beef that these Republicans have with Dorothy Moon. Well, let's turn to Lori Likely, who was more than willing to bare her soul in a Times News article, Unraveling the Idaho GOP, Dorothy Moon's Troubling Legacy. See, the stories are already being planted. And frankly, I think Dustin Hurst called this correctly. You watch the caucuses, they're going to throw monkey wrenches in, these folks who are plotting, here's how we're going to take over, the caucus meetings. they're going to do everything they can to make the caucuses fail and then turn around and blame that on Dorothy. So here's how Lori Likely puts it. Lori says, "As a devout Republican," okay, there's her religious credentials, "it pains me to reflect on the divisive legacy Dorothy Moon and her leadership team have etched in our grand old party. Once a party known for its unity and commitment to once conservative values," well, she's got that part right, once conservative values, "freedoms and liberties for all, fiscal accountability, support of science and data, unless it's locking you down and causing you to go into financial ruin and otherwise restricting you. But no, please continue. We find ourselves marred by internal conflicts, alienated members, and a distressing departure from our core principles. What does that potential legacy look like?" Well, before we go on to that, what are the core principles that Lori Likely is saying that Dorothy Moon and presumably others who are following her lead are departing from? And look, I'm just one person and not even paying that close of attention, but from my vantage point, it sure looks like it looks to me like in this case, Dorothy Moon and the people who stand with her, the Freedom Caucus, etc., they are the ones who are upholding the core values of the Republican Party. Oh, and holding people accountable, holding elected officials accountable when they fail to live up to those values. Let's go on with Lori Likely's editorial here. She talks about alienation of respected conservatives. Now, when we say respected conservatives, are we talking Jim Jones or talking Glenn Beck? What exactly does that mean? I'm sure there's something to it, but this is a hint without actually giving us any substance. What do you mean by respected conservatives? Moon's insistence on giving a small group of precinct committeemen the authority to bring elected officials to tribunals, to censure them and strip them of party resources with no appeal process, is nothing short of an unchecked power grab. Now, let's ask the question, though, since Lori isn't providing this context for us. Why were they called to account? If these were Republican elected officials who ran under the Republican banner and yet somehow have turned their backs on the core planks and principles of the Republican platform, why shouldn't they be held to account? For that matter, any elected official who fails to honor their oath, not only to the US Constitution, but to the Idaho State Constitution, how do you go about holding people accountable for a lack of fealty to the oath that they swore? Just a little something to think about. Lori's upset, but at this point, she still is hollering without actually showing us that she's been hit. She talks about Dorothy's zeal for condemning fellow Republicans for not meeting her personal definition of conservatism. Okay, I got to say something about this. The rules, as in the party platform, as in the Central Committee, the GOP state party rules, they're very clear. Okay, this is not one woman mad on power, just, dictating at a whim, which, by the way, is pretty much the indicator you're dealing with a dictator. She's following the rules and holding people to the principles and the rules that they agreed to when they joined the party or ran for office under the party, and the party helped them get elected. Somehow we're supposed to treat this like this is, this horrible quest for power. It's a naked grab for power. I think this is one of those instances where the people who are now out of power or who may find themselves feeling threatened, like they might lose their power, they're desperate to hang on to it, however possible. They talk about, in this case, Lori talks about rules and regulations undermining principles, imposing rules like the purity waiting period. Now, I don't know that that's what it's actually called in the rules, but this is to stop people from gaming the system, joining the Republican Party to wink, wink, vote as a Republican, and then turn around and go vote Democrat in the general election, where voters have to wait a year before affiliating with the Republican Party. Now, Lori Likely says that's an affront. Such rules serve only to alienate potential supporters, pushing them away rather than welcoming them into the conservative fold. That is very motherly and very nurturing language. It's also completely false. Look, potential supporters, if they're serious about it, are there because they uphold and they support the principles of the Republican Party, right? And if they don't, well then, how dare how dare you not welcome them into the conservative fold? Well, what if they're there to tear things up? What if they're there to water things down or mislead the people who are a part of that fold? Because we have a pretty good example of politicians who will say whatever it takes to get elected and then do whatever it takes to stay in power, even if it runs contrary to the actual principles that they ran on. So we'll have to figure that one out, Lori. Next, we have support of extremists and convicted criminals. Now, this is the guilt by association fallacy writ large. Moon has lent her voice of support for people like convicted rapist Aaron von Ellinger. Now, I know a little bit about Aaron von Ellinger's story, and to suggest that, oh, yes, Dorothy Moon was out there supporting rape because it was her friend. Not true at all. A colleague was accused of rape, ultimately, I believe, was convicted of rape, but it was not a slam dunk. Oh, yeah, everybody knew it was, and she was therefore supporting it. Now, there's claims that she shamed and even doxed the young woman who bravely spoke out against him. Again, no editorializing here, Lori, but yeah, we know that there was a conviction, but that alone doesn't tell us anything other than the boxes were checked. And, sometimes even juries make bad decisions. Anyway, she also, I'm not saying that was the case here. I'm just saying if your trust is, well, a jury said it, so therefore it must be good. You might want to grow up. She also shared support for, are you ready for this? Extremist Ammon Bundy. How is he an extremist? Well, he believes in limited government for starters, and also making sure that cozy corporate relationship between legislators and IACI doesn't grow so much cozier. By the way, you're seeing a lot of fighting right now within the legislature over budgeting because of this. The legislature is serving more as a clearinghouse for taxpayer dollars to its favored clients and special interests rather than actually representing the people. But hey, Dorothy's been associating with extremists, so therefore we got to throw her to the curb here. Both, among others, notice we only listed two, but there are others, please take my word for it, are troubling and undermine the values we should be upholding for our voters. Our voters. Wow, a little collectivist there. We must hold ourselves to a higher standard, which is why telling the truth might actually be a good place to start there, or at least giving people all of the facts. Oh, look at this. I just want to be left alone. Oh, looks like we got ourselves another extremist. And that's about what it takes in today's climate to find yourself labeled as such. Laurie complains about Dorothy Moon transitioning to a caucus causing voting chaos. Okay. Moon's decision to transition Idaho from a GOP primary to a caucus will drastically limit the number of people who can vote. By how much? No, you don't have numbers? Just, okay, throw out drastic and we'll just have to take you at your word. What caregiver, blue-collar employee, deployed military personnel, or stay-at-home mom will be able to dedicate hours of their day to a caucus? Now, my understanding is it's not supposed to take hours. And if you really can't find the type, all you can do is just, mail in a ballot or send it in electronically or something. Maybe you are too busy for the burdens of citizenship. Nonetheless, this move, Laurie says, made unilaterally, goes against the principles of inclusivity and broad participation that our party should stand for. That's sounding pretty woke, but okay, we'll let that go. And now the media cannot participate. Again, the rules are that only people who are vetted members of that precinct and their children are allowed to come into the caucus. Now, that doesn't mean that the media can't be there at all. They just have to be outside. They're not a part of this process. But for some reason, they want Dorothy to violate the rules. And these are the state GOP party rules that explain how these caucuses are supposed to take place. It's not a matter of, well, she decreed it. No, she's actually following the rules. So when Laurie Likely says transparency and election integrity seem questionable, okay, that's her casting aspersions. Does it necessarily reflect reality? Maybe, maybe not. I'm leaning towards maybe not. She says Dorothy Moon's leadership has left an indelible mark on the Idaho GOP, and it's not one we should celebrate. As Republicans, we must question whether we want a party that compromises its values, alienates its members, and allows power to be concentrated in the hands of a few. Again, I think Laurie Likely's big beef here is the hands of the few in which that power needs to be accumulated aren't hers. So I don't know if that's what's got her so upset, but that definitely, there's a taste of sour grapes there, even though Laurie actually is currently an office holder. Also, there's the growth of political extremism, elitism, and pandering to special interests. This is accusing people of what you either are doing or want to do. The rise of political extremism in Idaho is a direct consequence of Moon's leadership. Okay, what does that mean? What do you mean political extremism? Introducing books on masturbation into the school libraries or the public library for little kids to see? That seems pretty politically extreme. But it's not the conservatives. It's not the limited government conservatives who are calling for that. The idea that, they're pandering to the elite. No, that would be the well-connected, especially those favored interests who have a direct cash pipeline to or from the legislature. She says the concentration of power in the hands of party elites fosters an environment of elitism, alienating everyday Republicans who may feel their voices drowned out by a select few. Now, I'll tell you what else it prevents. people who come into the party for the reasons of trying to monkey wrench and otherwise subjugate what the party members are doing and what party participants are doing without actually adhering to the principles. So it's portraying it as the concentration of power in the hands of the elites just simply means the power's not in our hands, and therefore, we can't trust it. I'm not sure I would trust it even if it was in your hands, though. Moon's leadership seems to compromise our values in pursuit of financial support, jeopardizing the very principles we claim to uphold. That's very lofty. But again, I don't know that this actually represents reality. One last note here from Laurie Likely. Infighting and loss of party unity. A party strafed by infighting is a weakened party. Okay, she's not wrong there. Moon's tenure has witnessed internal strife, pitting Republicans against each other instead of focusing on the true opposition. Unity, once our strength, is now a distant memory. The only place I know of where uniformity of thought and unity and marching in lockstep really is celebrated as the most wonderful thing in the world would be a dictatorship. So when we have this talk about, they're not uniting people like we once did, I think the infighting that you're talking about is coming because people have woken up to the idea that their elected officials are actually violating the principles of sound government, and they're violating the principles of limited government. And frankly, they don't like it. And who can blame them? At any rate, now we know how the establishment feels about Dorothy Moon. To me, this is probably more of an endorsement than Laurie Likely and others would anticipate. But holy cow, the Main Street Caucus, the IACI types, and of course now the Gem State conservatives, they are determined they're going to save the Republican Party from itself by basically turning it into a Democrat Party light. I don't understand why they just don't change their own party affiliation. Now, they also liken, attempts to limit government to extremism. And as we all know, if you limit government, anarchy can't be far away. So let me leave you with this quote. This is from Gustav de Molinari. There we go. Sorry. I knew I would butcher his name the second and third time through. Anarchy is no guarantee that some people won't kill, injure, kidnap, defraud, or steal from others. Government is a guarantee that some will. When someone tries to tell you that the people who are trying to keep government limited to its proper role, who are trying to compel fiscal responsibility and accountability and transparency, when they're being attacked, not only by their own party members, but also by a compliant media, which consistently leans hard to the left, that should tell you that maybe the people who are coming after this, from the standpoint of, we're just trying to save the party, are actually trying to turn the party into something it was really never intended to be. And they really don't appreciate the opposition. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian, and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm crying.
Nobody wants to see
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.